Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Modern Musings. Today, I have the incredible pleasure of talking with someone who is not only a client of mine, but has become a very dear friend in the process of working with her. And I'm excited to report we're already at work on book number 2, which I'll hear about in this interview, as well as her first book. So let me introduce Jody Hadlock, the author of The Lives of Diamond Bessie, a novel, a historical fiction novel. Jody, in her past, has been a very experienced broadcast news reporter and anchor. And so story has always been really important to Jody. She's been reporting on stories her whole entire life, practically. But today we're going to hear about why she decided to actually write her own story, the story of Diamond Bessie, and then perhaps a little bit about that new book as well. Welcome, Jody.
Oh, it's so good to be here. Great to see you.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be able to introduce you to my audience and let them have a chance to hear about your book and how well it's doing. We were just saying before we hopped on the call that it's been just a year, right, since The Lives of Diamond Bessie was released.
Yeah, exactly 1 year.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about what prompted you to write that book in the first place.
Well, I'd always wanted to be a writer. And of course, so when I was in college, I majored in journalism. I knew that I needed to make a living when I got out of college. So I didn't think I was just going to step out and start writing books, partly because I didn't have any ideas. I didn't know what I wanted to write, but I knew I wanted to be a writer. So I went into broadcast journalism and I really enjoyed it, but I always wanted to write a novel. And it was an opportunity to go to a little town in Jefferson, Texas, in East Texas, a long time ago. We went to the historical museum and I saw a newspaper article about this woman named Diamond Bessie and her paramour / husband, Abe Rothschild. And I was immediately taken with the story. And at the time I was living in Charleston, South Carolina, working at a TV station there. And I made a vow when I came back to Texas, because I knew eventually I wanted to, that I would look into the story and determine if it would make a good novel. In my gut, I knew that it would. And so I was not surprised when I moved back to Texas and to anchor the news in San Antonio. I immediately started researching the story. And it's been a long journey, but that was finally the story that grabbed me and it never let go.
That's wonderful. Can you remind me again, how long ago did you first hear that story or connect to it?
It's kind of embarrassing to say because it was in the early 90s. It was a long time ago.
I think that's really important for readers to hear, though, and understand, particularly other writers. We can be in such a hurry. We want to get our books out there. Once we get hooked on a project, we're passionate about it. And there's that energy of like, come on already, let's get it published. And I think it's great to hear. Sometimes these things have to really brew for a while or germinate, right? And to my mind, there's sort of a divine right timing to how and when these stories come out into the world or are birthed.
Definitely. And I made a lot of mistakes. So people can learn a lot from the mistakes that I made. But it's interesting because now looking back, I see that I needed to go through everything that I went through to get to this point. So now I'm thrilled with my book being out now. And I think it was better to come out now instead of, say, 20 years ago. And just for a number of reasons. So what I'll say is that it's worth the wait.
Great. When you decided to hire some coaching support, how far along in the process were you at that point?
Well, I had this story for so long and I was struggling with it. And then other things were going on. So I set aside my writing for a long time and then came back to it in 2014 and had been so discouraged because I couldn't make any progress writing it as a novel. And so I thought, well, maybe it should be nonfiction, even though there was already a nonfiction book about the story, but there was a lot of wrong information and I thought it would be good to correct the record. And so I went to the Dallas-Fort Worth Writers Workshop in 2014, and they had all these exhibit booths there. And that's when I met someone who knew about you, and he had a website, and he said, look at the, because I was kind of in my mind, I thought, I wonder if I should, talk to somebody, a professional about this. But I was really resistant because I just had done it before, you don't know what cost is going to be involved and stuff. And but I looked at the website, and when I saw your information and your picture, and I just knew, I just connected with you that way and decided to dip my toe into the process. So when I first met you, I thought it was going to be nonfiction. So I don't know how much you want me to go on now, if you want me to continue with the story or not.
Sure.
Well, so when you and I first started working together, after a few months, we both decided that this really needed to be a novel. And I told you about how I had struggled, and I never had, the biggest struggle for me was I didn't have the right point of view. Now that I've gone through this process, I realize how critical having the right point of view is. And so you issued a challenge to me to write the book from a certain point of view. And I at first resisted, and you said, just try. And I said, okay. And then amazingly, I wrote the first draft of what was then the first chapter in 2 days. And I remember I sent it to you, and you got back to me pretty quickly, and you said, oh my gosh, you found your voice. And so I knew that I was finally on the right track. So it was absolutely key to me getting this manuscript done, working with a book coach, specifically working with you. And I was able to get the first draft done in 7 months. And then of course, there was a lot of revisions, and actually the story kept evolving. And a lot of that is because the way you coached me through the process. And I will say from a writer's point of view that you really need to keep an open mind. You don't want to be set in stone, like this is the way it has to be. You really have to be open to getting feedback and, considering ideas that maybe you hadn't thought of or afraid to try. So you really have to have an open mind. And I would say that the process was incredible. It really was. It was every time I sent you a draft, I mean, you kept pulling more out of me. And I wrote everything. I don't want to give anyone the impression that, that you did any ghostwriting. I wrote everything. You gave me the feedback, and you gave me the guidance as the story evolved, and really helped me improve it to get it to where it was in a publishable form. Because when you have a first draft, that's really usually awful. And so, I went through multiple drafts, and then the way that you issued more challenges to me during the process. And I will say, I accepted them. So, and whenever I've spoken to book clubs and different events, I've talked about you a lot, and usually a few times, because I say, well, then Bridget, challenged me to do this, and you were right every single time.
I was going to ask you next about the energetics and mindset tools that we use at Modern Muse. Can you say a little bit about that, and maybe even tie that into some of the challenges? I want to tell readers that the point of view, the POV voice that we decided that I felt you needed to explore was Diamond Bessie's, right? To put yourself in the shoes of that protagonist and really tell the story more from the inside of her out versus the historical external story, correct? That had already, as you said, been told with some errors and whatnot.
Yes,
but that was the big shift for you, was to move into her feet, or in her shoes rather, and tell the story from her
but
point of
not just with her alive. And I'll go ahead and spoiler alert,
yes.
But your specific challenge was for me to write it from her point of view, first person, as an earthbound spirit.
Right after.
And which I remember I froze, and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know if I could do that. So, but as far as working with you energetically, yes, it cleared, it just cleared a lot of things. Sometimes you have these blockages, these fears. I think it's just natural, because even working on my second book, and we've talked about this, working through getting past those limiting beliefs, or those fears that you have, so you can be as creative as possible. So I thought it was very beneficial, and to be able to really step into Bessie's shoes, to connect with her energetically when we did some of our work was invaluable.
Great. What avenue did you decide to use for publishing the book, and why?
Well, I knew that there were other people interested in writing Bessie's story. I mean, it's been out there for a long time. This is something that happened in the 19th century Texas. And there had been nonfiction books about her, songs, etc. So I knew there were other people that wanted to write about her.
And there
And
were
so I felt
other
a little
people
bit of
writing
urgency.
novels that you connected with,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I looked for an agent for a while, and it was close. And then so you can either go, the traditional route, and then of course people know about self-publishing, but there's one in the middle, hybrid publishing, which I decided to pursue, which you had recommended. And actually it was the best thing that I did. And I had some things happen where they just couldn't be coincidences. Like right when I signed with my publisher, because with hybrid publishing, the author has some costs, but you get a higher royalty. But you need to find a reputable hybrid publisher, but they do vet. It's not like self-publishing where you can just, you can publish. There is a vetting process. And then once you get into this, the system, then the process is very much like traditional publishing. You go through that whole same process, so you come out with a quality product at the end. But right when I signed the contract with Spark Press, which is the sister imprint to She Writes Press, I got an email. It was right about the same time. I got an email from a woman who had been researching Diamond Bessie for a year, and she was about to start writing her draft. She had one more question about something. She Googled whatever the keywords were, and my website popped up. And that was the first time. So it's kind of like a message that, yes, this was the right decision, because I was able to respond to her and say, I just signed with the publisher. And she hadn't started writing, but I did tell her, I said, I think there's room in the world for more than one novel about her. I didn't want to discourage her. But I was able to, honestly tell her, I'm at this point in my publishing path. And so I know it was the right decision, and I really enjoyed the process. And it's actually been very positive.
Great. That's wonderful. And where right now, how pleased would you say you were overall with now post-publication and getting the book out? You've done so much to market this book and do PR and whatnot. Can you share a little bit about that with the audience too? And what I would love for you to share about particularly is your book launch party.
Oh.
That was so fantastic.
Yeah, it was. So Jefferson is this tiny town in Northeast Texas. It used to be an inland river port. Now it was a happening place back in its heyday, and now it's a tiny town of 2,000 with a bunch of bed and breakfasts. They have an annual festival every year called Pilgrimage, and they do the Diamond Bessie murder trial play. And I thought, well, of course I have to have a book event in Jefferson. And so I was very happy for my book to come out in April last year, because at the end of the month, I had a book event at a coffee shop, and then had a dinner afterwards, which was absolutely wonderful. And it was such a fantastic way to launch the book. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work, because, and even if you're traditionally published, I hear that authors really need to market their own book, no matter how you publish. You need to be involved in that part of it. And I knew that I really, well, plus my background being in journalism, and I did nonprofit PR. So I already had some of the skills and the interest in doing that. So I focused a lot on marketing, and I'm very happy with the way things have been going so far. It's my first novel, an unknown debut author. So I wasn't, looking to sell 1 million copies, the first book. But I'm very happy with the way how it's done so far.
And how's the reception been with, you mentioned book clubs and other audiences that you've been?
I've done a number of book clubs, which I love. It's my favorite thing to do. And actually Bessie has won several awards, and it's up right now for a few more. It's a finalist, so I'll be finding out pretty soon the results of those. But I just felt being a finalist is winning. So that would just be icing on the cake if it did win the remaining contests that she's been entered in. So that's been fun as well, for it to get some recognition that way, because you put so much work into it, and I'm very proud of the finished product. And I mean, and I owe so much of it to you. I really do. And I've told you that so many times.
Can you say a little bit about those awards that you've won? What has the book won so far?
But the Independent Publishing Award, it's known as the IPPES
Association Award.
And it says the IPPES won that, and won a few others, Global Book Award, American Book Fest. And then it's up right now. It's a finalist in the Chanticleer Awards for late historical fiction. And then also for the Independent Book Publishing Association, their Benjamin Franklin Awards. It's a finalist and one of 3 finalists in the general fiction category. And that's the thing about the Lives of Diamond Bessie. It's not straight historical fiction, it's cross genre. So it's won for historical fiction, historical mystery, paranormal, and now it's finalist, in the general fiction category. And then there's, it's also up for the May Sarton Award, which is an award named in honor of the 20th century poet and novelist.
Congratulations. That's
Thanks. Yeah.
With your first debut novel, it's amazing that you had that kind of traction and that kind of recognition and acclaim already. It says so much about the book and about your skill as a writer too. Any other wisdom or insights you would offer to other people who are thinking about writing a book, or authors?
I'd say definitely don't give up. And I think I'm proof of that. Since I learned about this story so long ago, and it's been such a long journey, even though, there was a long time where I had to set aside my writing. But still, I'm glad I came back to it. I'm glad that I didn't give up. I mean, it felt like I was giving up for a time, but I really didn't. I came back to it. So they don't give up, and get feedback. Don't just write in in isolation, and don't ever let anybody see your work. You need to get some feedback. Whether if you're in a writer's group, working with a book coach, I did both. So I'm in a local writers group, and then also I say to accept what resonates with you as a writer. So just because you get this feedback, but you have to decide, you have the vision for your story. And so you have to decide what resonates with you and what you want to put aside.
And you've decided that you are, you're probably one of those like lifelong writers. Let's say you have a second book in the works. How much do you want to say about that? I'll give you an invitation to say
I'm going to be writing about Clara Barton, and I was going to write about someone else. And I've decided I'm going to focus on women in the 19th century. And I was going to focus on another character, but part of that would be set in Russia. And so I obviously can't go to Russia right now to do any research. But on top of that, I had read a nonfiction book about the last year of the Civil War, and there was two chapters about Clara Barton. And it had this information in there that I never knew. And I was just blown away. And so she started taking over my mind. And once I decided, okay, I want to focus on Clara, I have been researching for several months and doing some research trips. I need to do some more. But yes, I am so excited to be working with you on my second book. And hopefully it will go much more quickly now that I know kind of what I'm doing.
Well, and with this one, we have a stronger outline right from the beginning, correct? We're doing the pre-work of getting ready. We've done the vision questing and the sitting down and calling the book into being, really trying to connect to the energy of the book as if it's already written. And you've been communing with Clara in much the same way you did with Bessie, right? To some extent, channeling or just connecting with the energy of those very strong female role models. And then you are kind of faithfully listening and using your creative abilities and powers to then tell your story, tell Clara's story now in as powerful a way as you did Diamond Bessie's.
Well, I'm hoping that the second one will be better than the first. I think every writer wants to continually improve.
Sure.
And I do feel more confident with this one. And actually, and with the research with Diamond Bessie, there wasn't much known about her leading up to her murder. And then, and it took, because she was unknown. I mean, it just took a long time, the research. And of course, learning about life in the 19th century. With Clara, she was so well known. She was a household name that there's so much online and so many books written about her that part is a lot more, I'd say, easier and more efficient. But I think that the writing is still, it takes a lot. The other thing I've also learned is that it's not, writing a book, especially a novel. It's not just any books. It's not just the writing. There's so much more that goes into it. There's all the planning and like what you and I are doing right now. We've done the vision questing, but then also taking the research and distilling it down into an outline. But I also, because I think my background as a journalist, I think more logically. You help me focus on the creative side, which is what I need. And so that's really being instilled in me. So as I work on the outline, I'm not just thinking logically, I'm thinking creatively and about character development and the character arc, which
and plot.
And plot. So I'm actually doing everything at the same time, which is great. Before I siloed everything, and but now I'm approaching it entirely differently, and it's all because of you.
Well, I think with that first book, what we found, right, was your early drafts were very fact-based, and that was the journalist in you coming forward. And I remember reading it thinking like, wow, this woman is an incredible researcher, and you had all these facts, but it was a little dry, honestly.
Yeah.
There wasn't, the life of the story wasn't there yet, right? And what we teased to get out together was really breathing life into Bessie and bringing her alive on the page and finding the places that allowed for emotional connection, which is what readers really look for. As much as we look to maybe learn about a place or a time when we're reading things like historical fiction, especially, there still needs to be that heart-to-heart connection, correct? That sense of like being able to see the humanity in those characters, to care about them like we would about a human being.
And Clara was fascinating, not just accomplished though, but her personal life and her personal struggles. It's really, I'm so excited to be working on this book.
I have a question about this one for you in regards to what you were saying about how with Bessie, you didn't know a lot about her. There wasn't a whole lot of historical background. There was some, but not a ton. Whereas with Clary, there's a lot, right? It's all pretty well laid out. And I'm wondering, and I know you're early in this draft, but I'm wondering if you're feeling yet, is that going to be more of a help or a hindrance? Because what the lack of information around Bessie gave you was the freedom to make a lot of things up to serve the story, right? And so as you're now preparing to work on Clara, how are you feeling, or how has that process been so far? Do you feel a little bit more hampered by just the facts, that you have to stay in those facts, or is it feeling like there's enough freedom and room for you to also be more creative, like you just talked about?
Actually, I surprisingly have not felt a hindrance or hampered it, by the facts that I think because her diaries are online, and so I'm seeing a personal side of her that's not typically in a biography. Yes. But it's also my mindset. I'm actually since I'm thinking creatively, I'm not just thinking about the facts. As I'm researching, I'm looking for clues into how she was as a person. Yes. And kind of more of those details. I'm really thinking about that as much as the events that happened. Yeah. And she was involved in so much that, a lot of the things that she did are just amazing. But when you take in her personal struggles, her internal struggles, that makes the story even more amazing, really.
Well, it's like, it's such an amazing, it has potential, it feels like, to be such an amazing character sketch in the backdrop of history, right? Or set against the backdrop of history, that we're going to get a much more interior look into Clara Barton, the woman. Yes. As she accomplishes all the amazing things she did with the Civil War and the Red Cross and whatnot. Yeah, I for one can't wait to not only work on this book with you, but then be able to read it and put it on my shelf. Do you have Diamond Bessie handy there?
Oh my gosh,
I
I
know.
cannot believe it. I
You
don't
got Clara on
have-
the wall behind you, and I see your frame print.
Wait, you see Clara, and here's the, got a few, well, this is one thing that I guess be good to point out is that I'm also this time of the book doing, I have a storyboard. So for each
Yes.
chapter, I have the characters and, know what they look like, and I just have all sorts of notes. I have a timeline, an outline, etc. And on another wall, I have a map of Washington, D.C. in 1850 that I'm also using. I'm very visual, so I like to can just map everything out.
No, I love this. I talk a lot about creating a book altar, and to a certain degree, you've created a book sanctuary here. You have your room where you have all of your time and space to write, and all of the pieces that you need around you for inspiration. And I can see on your back wall behind you, you've got a print of the Lives of Diamond Bessie right there.
Can't believe I forgot to.
There it is, the Lives of Diamond Bessie. Where
I only have a whole box by my desk.
Where can readers find the book and find you? More information about you. Give us your website and any contact information.
I have a website. It's just my name. It's Jody Hadlock, and I'm on Instagram and Facebook. You can find me using Jody Hadlock, and of course the book's available Amazon in ebook and printed copies, but also on Nook, Kobo, Barnes and Noble. I mean, basically anywhere. You can just type in the title and you'll see all the places that it's at. You can get it all over the world, of course, and it's also an audiobook.
Great.
Yeah, and the narrator, Anthea Greco, was absolutely fantastic. She was a really wonderful narrator for the story.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you taking the time out from your writing. I know how precious that time is for you. And congratulations. We got our fingers crossed for the awards that are still pending for Bessie, and best of luck with Clara.
Thank you so much.
Jody Hadlock, everybody, with Modern Muse for Writers, modernmusewriters.com and jodyhadlock.com.